Hi, I'm Yasmin Owusu, and this is my producer, Charlie Kesenek.
But I'm your husband, and you're using all my stuff right now. What are you talking about?
So anyway, I've been looking for a one-stop shop podcast for wellness, amateur sociology, psychology, pop culture, and whatever else sparks my interest. So I created one. We are limited to no lanes. We hit the gas and get into it. This is Peaked. Press play. Hi, welcome to Peak Podcast. I'm Yasmin. I'm back in my nook, ready to chat. It's been a week. It's literally been a week, but it's also been a week figuratively. Like, boy, it has been one. You're hearing this a little bit later, but I'm in the past. And this week, when I started this podcast, I was advised wisely by Charlie, my producer and husband. And by the way, the leader of this band, the t-shirt I'm wearing, if you're on YouTube, you can see it. Symmetry. This is how you spell it. Get a shirt, listen to his music. It's great. But anyway, moving on. He suggested that I start a TikTok and Instagram account to go along with my podcast where I could post clips and hopefully get some traction over to my podcast. So far, until this point, so bad. But, I got a little bit of a hit because I had 3 viral clips on TikTok. Pause for applause, which has been fun. I've first of all, I accrued a lot of followers, so hopefully I can get a wider audience that way. But I also just got to have a lot of engagement with other people about, my topics. And so last week I discussed 3 different people in media or whatever prominent people who I think show up variedly, inauthentically, or maybe the media is creating an inauthentic messaging or a narrative around them, let's say. So I discussed Alicia Keys and her in her sanctimony about not wearing makeup while she was wearing makeup. In my opinion, this is an opinion podcast, right? I don't claim to be an expert on anything. I'm just yapping. And then I also discussed Pamela Anderson, and that's more the narrative created around her choosing to show up less, I guess, va-va-voom looking and a little bit more like high fashion, less makeup, blah, 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 and aging naturally or appearing to age naturally and being lauded in the media as being someone who's like a pinnacle of like natural aging, even though it's a very cosmetically enhanced person. And I discussed that and, also was kind of making it as apparent as I could that I was not speaking ill of this woman and her choices. And I think that she looks great. And I said that both on the podcast, in the clip, in the caption, in the comment section. And I'll get to why I'm telling you this. And then I also discussed Bethany Frankel. This has been the biggest viral one. I mean, at like 2 million plus views at this point. I think it must have resonated with enough people. But just how I think that she's a performative eater online. There were a lot of people who agreed with a lot of these things that resonated with them. They're like, basically just laughing along. Because even when I'm talking about topics which I'm pretty serious about, which I kind of always am, I guess, I do kind of deal with serious things with humor. So, my clips were humorous. I'm always a clown. But so there was a lot of giggles, but there were a lot of people, sharing their experiences with either restrictive eating because of the performative eating theme, or with the fact that they're getting older and they feel weird pressure to like show up a certain way because people are being touted as being natural agers when they're in fact not. And then, we were all pretty just irked and itchy about Alicia Keys wearing her Costco beat and calling it a natural face. Anyway, but so I had a lot of dialogue, and then there were plenty of people who disagreed, but disagreed thoughtfully and gave me interesting perspectives. How much I chose to absorb them, obviously, I kept my perspective. I'm a Taurus, you know what I mean? But I still enjoyed the engagement, and I watched people kind of go back and forth on stuff who didn't agree with me, and I found that really fascinating. I love dialogue, and that's why I'm over here yapping every week, largely to no one. But yeah, so all of this to say, those were all great. Disagree, agree, whatever, engage. It's fun. The one kind of comment that was kind of irking me, or not kind of, very much irking me, was, Jesus Lover 165, MAGA makeup, who was kind of doing the whole, be nice, don't be a mean girl. Women shouldn't tear down women. So listen, I happen to be discussing women um, in the media. One, because I take more of an interest in women. As a woman, women's issues tend to affect me more than men's issues. I'm not over there reading Men's Health Weekly or, worrying too much about what Timothy Chalamet is doing on a Zoom. It's just kind of my way. I'm a woman who deals in women. Most of my family are women. That's just how it worked out. All my friends are. It just is kind of how it is, and I'm really concerned with you know the progression of women as a whole, and making sure that I think that we're treated fairly, and that we treat each other fairly. And the mean girl thing, beyond it just being asinine and reductive, which it is, it's also kind of an infantilizing term. Like, we all watch that movie. I'm a millennial, card carrying, love that movie, but it's about girls in high school. They are girls. We're not in the schoolyard anymore. We discuss things that are difficult. We need to disagree. We need to hold each other accountable. We need to have expectations of prominent women, um, make those expectations known, talk about harmful narratives that are being created either by the women or against their will, or without their knowledge, but around them, that could be harmful to women and girls. And I don't think shutting down dialogue by just women supporting women no matter what, serial killing women, support monster, Charlize Theron played her. So, like, we do not support everything women do with impunity. There are many people in my family, in my life, whoever, that I feel very supportive of, but I'm not going to be down with them like doing crack and support them no matter what. So please, enough with this reductive nonsense. Don't be a baby, grow up, get out of the schoolyard. There's no mean girls. Let's talk about stuff. And that's what I'm here to do. So that kind of comment made me itchy. And with the Bethany Frankel performative eating thing, I do want to get a little bit into that. Um, so the reason that it was so noticeable to me that this woman, of course, she eats sometimes in these videos. Of course, she takes a bite. For the most part, if you watch 50 of her videos and you are unfortunately given the horrible superpower of being able to tell when people are avoiding putting food in their mouth. Um, yeah, if you watch 50 of her videos, four of them she probably maybe choose something, and the rest of them are just going to be eating a corner of lettuce. Again, I don't want to rehash last week's episode, but I do think that there was a lot of ignorance around ED that I was noticing in this comment section from the people who are just like, don't be mean to her. She does eat. Maybe she does, by the way. I am not her doctor. I'm not able to tell you if she has a restrictive eating issue or if she has an eating disorder. I don't know this. What I have noticed is that she does performative eating online. And that is a very common eating disorder behavior. And if that's not something that she suffers with, she should know that that is something that women who do suffer with eating disorders do and can be triggering to them. And if you don't want to eat and you don't want to engage with food authentically online, you can post myriad other kinds of content, right? And, I know this firsthand, I should say, because I had an eating disorder. I guess you kind of always do in a way. The funny thing about recovery from eating disorders is, like, it's not like alcohol or drugs where you can abstain. You'll always have to interact with food and eating and health. And, you want to maintain a healthy weight, right? So you want to make sure that you're not, overindulging. But at the same time, that means you have to deal with restriction. You have to contend with it. You can't just quit it. Do you know what I mean? And even with exercise, it's like we want to exercise to be healthy. I love to exercise. I love to exercise. It's crazy. I just said I love. I'm telling people to show up authentically online, and I just said the words "I love to exercise." I do not love to exercise. I love to trick myself into exercising by playing tennis because I enjoy tennis. Wow, I'm just on here lying. I'm on here lying about lying. Anyway, but yeah, even exercise, like, you have to watch yourself, especially with me. My ED was so tied up with what I believe is OCD as well, like undiagnosed, but I have a lot of behaviors that WebMD has told me are probably OCD related, and I definitely think that that's a factor in how I developed an eating disorder in the first place. Just this ideation and control, and anyway, um, those who know will know, but yeah, you need to engage with food. You need to engage with how much or little of it you eat. You have to engage with how much or little you're exercising and make sure you're not exaggerating there or being out of whack with anything. And you can't just quit these things because these are part of life and health. So unlike other, problems or addictions or illnesses, there's no abstaining from this. So that can be very difficult to contend with, and it makes it very difficult to completely get over because you can't abstain, right? So anyway, I had active and problematic eating disorder in my teens, like preteens, teens, and then early 20s. And during that time, I also performed a lot of these. Performed. I also exhibited a lot of the behaviors of performative eating. Like I would always just be really theatrical about how much I ate before I met up with people. I'd be like, "Oh my god, I'm so full. I just had a huge plate of pasta." And that's like you're before anyone's even talking about eating, you're kind of like laying the stage for why you're not going to later, right? But then they implant in their mind, "Oh, pasta, she eats pasta, great." And like that you keep implanting this idea in people's minds of like that you're just someone who eats and it's chill, right? And then, if I did happen to like go with my friends to like grab a slice of pizza, I'd be like very like wolfing it down and like just eating the whole thing in like 2 seconds. And in their mind, they're just like, no, I've eaten with Yasmin a bunch. Like she wolfs down pizza. Meanwhile, if I ate that slice of pizza, I wouldn't eat for like a day and a half, right? So like behaviors like that, or just moving your thing around and then being like, oh my God, I'm so full. And just you've taken like the side of a bite of a piece of lettuce and moved everything around and like just made theatrical noises and grabbed sauces, but you haven't actually consumed anything. So this is what it looks like when I watch Bethany Frankel's videos. I'm not saying that's 100% what's happening, that she has a restrictive but that's what her videos are giving, and I don't love it. It does keep sick people sick to have their performative eating normalized. It definitely, if I had not been able to get away with all the performative eating that I did, all the talking nonsense about how much I'd eaten, if people hadn't bought it and it hadn't been so brushed over or normalized, who knows? I might not have had that issue as long. So I just kind of wanted to get into that and like be a little bit transparent myself about why it's so notable to me. I mean, there were a lot of people who saw my video and then they had enjoyed or just watched her content kind of neutrally and then were like, "Oh my god, you're right. She kind of doesn't eat the food." And they hadn't noticed. And listen, you're not gonna notice. It's a terrible curse that it's the way that like an addict can always kind of tell another addict. I know all the tricks. I've played all the tricks, and I can clock it in 2 seconds. And again, I cannot say that she has an eating disorder. I can clock that there's performative eating going on. Her reasons for it are her own. I can't tell you what those are, but I'm clocking and I can stand behind that I have seen this woman pretend to take bites of things and she's eating the corner of a lettuce, you know, and do with that what you will. Um, but yeah, I'm going to move on from that for now. But yeah, it was interesting and very exciting to have that much engagement on any of my content. But so I wanted to move on. I did want to talk a little bit about there's a comedian. His name is Caleb Heron, I believe. And he has a podcast as well, which is super funny. It's called That's So True with Caleb Heron. He also has a special, and he's a funny comedian. I think he got his start on TikTok, actually, topically. But I heard him on someone else's podcast, and I don't know how old or new the clip is, but I just kind of wanted to talk about it anyway, where he was basically talking about being a progressive, or if you want to use the annoying word woke, go for it. Liberal, he's an LGBTQ plus man, um, a white man from the Midwest. But he was talking about how he used to when he was younger, and he's still pretty young now. I think he's like early 30s tops. But he was talking about how when he was like super young, he was very insufferable about his like delivery and how he would engage with talking about his political views or his like social views, socially progressive views, right? And I wanted to say I found that really refreshing. I also have tried to kind of examine my delivery and how I've been like showing up in these conversations because, as a collective, because I consider myself to be leftist, liberal, woke if you want, progressive. both socially, fiscally, you name it. I'm just progressive all the way around. Like, I just want everybody to have equal rights, and be able to, live wherever they live, especially, where I live in this country, as freely as they can, um, without infringing on other people's freedoms. Right. That's my general jam. Um, I'm kind of putting the Democratic establishment in timeout right now. That's my journey. We're not in a good place. It's weird between us right now. But the other headings, if you want to put them over me, I mean, I've got the nose ring. I don't have the purple hair for all the, those Bass Pro Shop dudes who just like to hone in on the no. Why do they hate septums so much? It's so funny. Don't we look like your sheep or whatever? You should think it's cute. Is it goats? Anyway, I digress. It was refreshing to hear someone on my side of the fence kind of take a hit, like investigate themselves a little bit, like call themselves to account. I was talking about accountability. I want to hold myself to accountability to account as well. I want to hold myself to a standard as well. And it's interesting. We came from different lenses of why, like, I believe that I've displayed that behavior too, more when I was younger, but I'm sure I still do it now to some extent. That sort of overly rabid, overly defensive, sometimes preemptive strikes. Like, you're just expecting to get some level of toxicity or hate speech or like, oh, sorry, I almost got right in my mic there. Bad messaging, and you kind of jump all over it, and you don't actually let people like express themselves or get their ideas out before you just assume what they are and kind of attack them. And um, just kind of, I don't know, just never have the two ears to listen and the one mouth to talk, right? It's like you're just all mouth, right? So he's kind of describing that. And he said that where he was coming from with it was a fear based response, but a fear of seeming like not the good guy, like not one of the good guys, being that, he does come from this Midwestern, like rural area. He comes from a rural Missouri, and he's this imposing tall white man, and so maybe there are people who might think that he's not welcoming to certain groups in our country and in our society, whereas and he wanted to make it abundantly clear that he is, and he's like on the right side of history, on the right side of, well, everything, I guess. And I can relate to that on some level. I would say I came from a different lens where it was fear based, sure, but more, I never wanted anyone to feel comfortable um, saying things that were hateful, microaggressive, racist, and not just towards my own group. Like, being a Black woman, I'm African. I don't know how much anyone can tell. I'm half Armenian, so I don't know how much I'm dealing with any backlash from that. But let's say that someone was just talking about Armenians poorly. I wouldn't want that to happen in front of me. But not just my groupings, not just being a woman, not just being Black, not just being, Caucasan or whatever. But also, I wouldn't want them to feel comfortable saying anti-Semitic things around me, anti-Asian. That, like, if I felt like a conversation was going to go in a certain way because people said certain, I guess, hot button words that just, I don't like to use the word triggered, but I guess like activated me. I wouldn't necessarily wait and find out if they were actually going to do that. It would be a preemptive strike, like just a snake, right? And I kind of want to soften that approach and see what happens when you let people kind of flesh out their thoughts. And if we do need to contend with some fuckery, we can do that. If someone wants to F around, they can find out, but let's not let them find out before they F around. And I think, that's kind of what he's saying that he's come to and learned. And I'm hoping a lot more of us as liberals, as progressives, as the, whatever the new psychosis, delusion, conspiracy theory wants to call us these days, whatever they want to call us. I want us to find a different approach because the one we've been using hasn't been working. It's not working. Look at where we are, right? And I think part of that is delivery. And that brings me to, I did also want to discuss on the other end. So we have someone who's kind of like self investigating and thinking about those things. I did see one of my faves, Carol Radziwill. If you're not familiar with Carol Radziwill, she was on The Real Housewives of New York. That's how I came to know about her. But she also was married to a Polish aristocrat who passed away. He was a filmmaker and a journalist, and she also was a journalist. Is a journalist, I guess you can say. But when she was younger, she was like actively a journalist, going to war zones and whatnot. Um, and that's how they met. But he was related to a Polish aristocrat. Like he was a prince in some way, and then his mom was Lee Radziwill, who was Carolyn, not Carolyn, who was Jackie Kennedy's sister. So she has that kind of like Kennedy connection, and then she was like besties with like JFK Jr. and his wife Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, which is where I was getting my babbling about Carol's. But anyway, she's also an accomplished author. I read her book, What Remains, and it's great. And I enjoy her as a public person. I did not enjoy, however, something that I saw on Threads. I know I shouldn't be on Threads, but there I was. And someone had posted, I've been vocal about being very pro Mamdani. Someone had posted that now that Mamdani has won the election, the mayoral election of New York City, that a lot of people are going to be fleeing to certain states. And this person was kind of being toxic and being like, these states are full. And it was like, Texas, where I live, and like certain other states, like a lot of them in the South and the Midwest. It's like, these states are full. Don't come here with your, liberal bullshit. And, these people, I guess, are saying they're fleeing. Again, they're fleeing because they're scared that we're going to be under Sharia law in New York or whatever they're doing. I think most of it is that they don't want to pay certain taxes, and they're um, painting it as though like Mamdani is going to make them all wear a burqa, whatever it is. Nonsense. But yeah, anyway, this thread was like, don't come to these states. And her response, which by the way, that was snarky and annoying, the don't come to these states, we're full. But her response I didn't love, which was, don't worry, we don't want to go to places with low literacy. See, now we're over here trying to be, the right side, the side that cares about people and is compassionate and wants the best for every group, every sect. And here we are saying that, people have low literacy rates between the coasts. And, as someone who my American side of the family is from the Northeast, I do find that I often have to kind of fight against type of like this perception of this coastal elite nonsense. I don't even like using that term because it sounds like you believe that that exists if you say it. But there are people who seem to take an attitude that everything between LA, New York City, and like Miami and whatever's up top that might be progressive, everything in between is just a bunch of like toothless idiots who like, deplorables, as Hillary Clinton once called them. And I don't think this helps us. If you want to talk about bad messaging that is off-putting and it brings nobody around to your side, I would say that's it. And specifically literacy, girl, as a journalist, when you're talking about some of the states that he had mentioned, like Tennessee, Mississippi, you have a lot of like poor people who don't have access, and their school zones are underserved, and a lot of them are of color who are, do not have access. So there's like an equity and an access issue. So it's kind of like pointing at someone who has no food and being like, haha, you can't eat. It's just not lovely. And I know that this was, again, she's engaging the behavior Caleb Heron was saying that he was engaging in, and that I have admitted to engaging in, so I'm not just trying to come for her. Like I really enjoy her media, and I don't think she thought too much of this comment. It was maybe just a bit of a quip. And, we've all kind of felt like we have to defend ourselves and like not be pushed around. And I can appreciate, taking on a ballsier approach, but we just need to watch who we're punching and make sure we're not punching down. And I think punching at people's ability to have access to education is not great, and it's not who we purport ourselves to be. Right? We want to bring up the equity. We want to bring up the literacy rates. We want to give access to good funding for schools in those areas rather than point and laugh at people for not being able to read. So that's my take on that. And I do really just believe if we want to get out of this hole we're in, this cesspool hole where we're listening to who may have, serviced who and why we might be, funding genocides because, people want to get freaky and get caught doing it by operatives and, and are being blackmailed. If you want to get out of that hole, this is not, God, the word hole was like, anyway, this is not how to do it. So let's try. Let's be better. Let's try harder. Women supporting women. Yeah. Moving on. So we'll talk about a bad man. Let's talk about a bad man. I can't say he's a bad man. I'm so deeply unserious. But anyway, Courtney Kardashian and Travis have been being discussed quite a bit lately, of late. I've watched the new episodes of the Kardashians. I think that's what it's called now, just the Kardashians. And I got to tell you, I don't love their dynamic right now myself. I don't love whenever I see a woman who was in a baddie phase, which after Courtney broke up with Travis, after Courtney broke up with Scott and was with that gorgeous Algerian model, Younes Benjama, she was very much, you know, in baddie zone. She was, dressed to the nines. She was, talking in a whisper to him, Younes. And we were happy for her. When you are with a person who is cheating and is an addict and is throwing a lot of responsibility on you and you're a caretaker, it can really take it out of you and it can really pull away your shine, right? So it was nice to see her kind of just like get out there and just not seem so miserable and judgmental the way she seems to be back to being. Um, it was really interesting watching her kind of try to talk to her sisters about why she's walking around dressed like Chingy. Um, she's like, I just can't see myself putting on an outfit ever again. And, I don't know why that needs to even be discussed. Like, you do you and let those your sisters do them. And it feels defensive. It feels like you're getting ahead of something. But yeah, it does seem notable that since she's been with this man, it almost feels like all of that sparkle has that she got post Scott has drained out of her, and she's just like a shell of herself. And yeah, it's all opinion, and I think it's his fault. I think it's his fault. I haven't loved some of the behavior before this season. A lot of the kids, Courtney's kids had expressed they didn't love the Uber PDA around them. And I always felt like, why is this man, throwing his tongue down this girl's throat, like in front of the kids, and especially if they've expressed that they don't love it. And yeah, that icked me out. But then this season, there have been some serious behaviors that I'm just like, ugh. And you know what? Let's talk a little bit about his ex-wife as well. This lady, Shayna Moakler, who was a Playboy model when she met him. And they ended up being on a show called Meet the Barkers. And I watched that a little bit. And I also watched this Playboy bunny, obvious baddie, be basically bedridden throughout this show. She like conducted her life from bed and just looked exhausted. And is it a coincidence that this man seems to take a baddie and like turn her into a bed bug? But that seems to be what happens with him. And I also found it really icky. This True Romance thing. So he's obsessed with the movie True Romance. And there's a character in True Romance called Alabama Whitman. And I won't explain the whole movie plot. Look it up if you want to. It's actually a good movie. But he's obsessed with it. And Shayna Bogler talked a lot about how it was like kind of their thing. And then, when he's with Courtney, now it's their thing. And she's dressing up like Alabama Whitman for Halloween. But then he also called his daughter Alabama. And I'm like, oh, this is like a sexy character you're obsessed with and you call your daughter that. I don't know. Yeah, a bit of a weird dude. But there were a couple scenes that I was like, and I think a lot of people have expressed this that just gave us pause. One was they were going to a ride, I believe, at Disneyland. And Courtney was like, I don't think we should bring Rocky, which is their youngest, like kind of newborn. Not a newborn, but he's a baby. I don't understand how old babies are. It's just, I don't have any. I don't know. Mine is 60 pounds and he's out of the other room and he has a snout. But she didn't want to bring the kid on the ride. And, they were in a car together and Travis just like, nah, he's not pressed about scary things. And that was the end of the discussion, which, maybe would have been okay if the next scene wasn't that they were at this ride and Courtney was carrying him the entire time. And not once did he seem to offer to help her, this, 4'9" in kitten heels woman, help her care in 6-inch heels. She's probably 4'9", carry around this child. She's just hoofing it around with him the whole time. You wanted to bring him so badly, you carry him with your, is he maybe 5'7" with your 5'8" ass? Like you carry him. And then there was another scene where he basically drags her on a marathon at his pace. I'm stuttering. I'm so mad. So this woman expressed that she was not feeling good. She had not trained properly for a marathon, and he decided that she needed to do it anyway. And not only did he make her do it and convince her and completely brush over her attempts to say she didn't want to do it, but he took her by the hand and led her at his pace. This man has feet on feet on feet on this tiny, minuscule woman who is not also a trained athlete. And he's been training for this marathon, and he dragged her on this entire marathon. What a nightmare. I can't imagine why she's exhausted. He's also that type of dude, it seems to me, opinion, don't sue me, allegedly, bravo, bravo, bravo. Seems like the type of dude who just does whatever he wants, but he needs what he wants when he wants it. So like it's not going both ways. He does whatever he wants. He goes on his tour. He wants the kid to be there. He wants his matcha. He wants whatever the hell he wants. Um, he wants to run marathons, but she also needs to straddle him, be sexy baby, take his tongue in her mouth. Also, while the kids are there, but also like just leave the house in 2 seconds, which is why she probably leaves looking crazy a lot and like go on marathon. Like she needs to be whatever he needs her to be at any given time. But he needs to be nothing but exactly who he feels like being. And I think that is exhausting and that is draining. And yeah, I think she's the source and he might be schnarchishnist. But I'll leave them there for now. You know, in the vein of divided America, I do want to talk a little bit about Dave Portnoy and something that happened to media with him before I call it for the day. So there's a whole bunch of layers to this. So I'll start from the beginning. A while ago, a few months ago, Dave Portnoy has a bar. If you don't know who Dave Portnoy is, by the way, he owns the media entity that is Barstool Sports. So this involves podcasts, sports betting. It's got a bunch of things under its heading. He's also kind of an influencer in his own right. He's an outspoken Boston guy, so he's just going to kind of say what he thinks, and he rarely apologizes for it, for better or worse. It's not a kind of character that I'm unfamiliar with coming from the Northeast. Yeah, we agree on some things, we don't on others. Here we are. But he also has an adorable rescue dog who has their own account. And he does pizza reviews, which are they do really well. They get a lot of engagement online. But so he owns a bar it's a Barstool themed bar, I guess. And a few months ago, there were people who got a table and they got bottle service, and the bottle service sign at his bar says F the Jews on it. And he gets wind of it and is obviously infuriated because what the hell? That's insane. And the people who did it, I guess the bottle service girls were like, oh, it's a joke. I'm not interested in hearing what the punchline of that joke is. And I don't care what you think it is. It's definitely not funny and not acceptable to ever write anything like that on a sign. But I guess he, was pretty calm about it overall. I mean, for Dave Portnoy, he was pretty calm about it and said that maybe rather than press any charges, I have microphone troubles. He would rather, I'll just sync to where the microphone is. He would just rather have them get education about the Holocaust and a little bit of just like understanding about like Jewish culture and sensitivity, right? And this other character named Average Mick, I don't know these people. I listen to one Barstool podcast, but not this one specifically. But this guy said something along the lines of, oh, Rabbi Dave. I think his meaning with that was like, oh, kumbaya, you're going to bring everyone together. But I don't love the wording of that either. I don't think that Dave Portnoy liked it. And then on another podcast with a man named Kirk, I don't know who these people are. God help me. Kirk McMinihan, something Irish like that. he got into a blowout fight with him because this Kirk guy said you should sit down with Average Dave and hash it out. He should be able to say whatever he says, and this person should be able to say, F the Jews, and everyone should be able to discuss it. And I can agree with Dave here that that there's no place for hate speech, and he got very heated and was like, "No, oh, you piece of ass! Like you work for me, and I can't believe you think that I should just sit down and like listen to someone spew hate speech. These people, I don't know if he said these people should be in jail, but something like it shouldn't be acceptable. No one should be allowed to do that." Which I agree. So those events happened, right? Then he is doing one of his Dave Portnoy is doing one of his pizza reviews in Starksville, Mississippi, by Mississippi State University. And this kid walks by, starts throwing coins at Dave and calling and saying F the Jews to him. F the Jews, throwing coins at him. Gross. And Dave is like, get in the frame. Where are you running to? Get in the frame. What are you saying? Why are you yelling this? What the hell's wrong with you, kind of thing? And this guy is like, oh, like he's stuttering and because, these idiots always are, right? They're just very bold until they're actually called out. And then, you can't really seem to get your words out. Cat got your tongue. But anyway, he stutters through saying, you think that people like me should be in jail for saying F the Jews. Well, I'm saying it, F the Jews, F the Jews. Like, and, Dave's like, I didn't say you should be in jail or something like that. I don't know if he did or he didn't. He definitely said something along the lines of like, it shouldn't be okay, which I can agree. Long story short, so this guy does end up getting apprehended and put in and charged with disturbing the peace. And I think the reason that this was able to be charged was because it was disrupting an event. I don't know if the event was that there was a Mississippi State football game or the event was Dave Portnoy was filming a pizza review, but either way, whatever, gets this guy consequences is just fine by me. And Dave Portnoy has been interviewed about this and then also the other anti-Semitic I guess, occurrences that have happened surrounding him. And he's expressed that he feels that there's an uptick in anti-Semitic rhetoric and just people feeling really emboldened to say awful anti-Semitic things. And, I can't disagree with that either, frankly, because as someone who is very pro-Palestine and the liberation of Palestine and has been outspokenly against the genocide, I feel crazy saying I'm anti-genocide. I mean, aren't we all? We would hope, right? But unfortunately, it seems maybe not. But I've been outspoken. I mean, half Armenian too. Not that you need to be from a people who have had a genocide to be anti-genocide, but I've got myriad reasons to be very critical of the genocide that Israel is perpetrating on the Palestinian people, and I am anti that government doing that to those people, right? But within me saying that, sometimes, whether it's online, maybe a little bit even in person, the people who agree with me often will try to go into anti-Semitic, hate speech. And I'm like, no, we are not the same. You don't get to use this conflict. You don't get to use the genocide and this government acting, in ways that are, the universal community would say is abhorrent. It's a government. You don't get to use that to call an entire both race and religion abhorrent things. I don't feel that way at all. There's not a bone in my body that's anti-Semitic. There are many bones in my body that are anti-Israel. And those are two very different things, and I don't like to see them conflated. And I don't want anyone to think that they can say anti-Semitic things with me and that I'm going to agree with that. And I don't want them to further muddy those waters for Zionist people who are trying to further their agenda and say that we're all anti-Semitic when we're 100% not. I'm not African American, but I'm Black and I live in this country. And so the way that I'm able to show up and have my freedoms has a lot to do with the civil rights movement, which, Jewish people were very, shoulder to shoulder with African Americans getting those rights, and protesting. And I don't even need to say that you don't even have to have a group of people do something favorable to you for you not just to be a piece of shit who's racist or bigoted, right? But I have noticed that, and I have noticed in my comment sections, even the clip I was talking about that went viral with Bethany Frankel, I'm being critical of her performative eating, and someone's like said something along the lines like, "Well, she's a Jew," so something like that. And of course, I told them how far off to f and other colorful things that I won't repeat here. But that kind of thing, I've seen it a lot. And I call it out when I see it, but I've seen people feeling really emboldened, especially online, to say insane anti Semitic things. And they're not getting flagged and they're not getting banned. And, they're not even getting folded in comments. It's absolutely wild. And it's 100% a thing. And it is emboldened. But you know, I don't think anyone deserves it. I don't get any joy out of it. But I will say it does make me want to emphasize that we need to watch out who we elevate. And, Dave Portnoy has been outspoken about voting for Trump and supporting Trump. And I think maybe if he examined the way that Trump speaks about certain um, groups in our country and in our society, the way he's spoken about them publicly with impunity, whether it be disabled people, whether it be Muslim people, whether it be people he's claiming are Muslim when they're not. Um, you name it, Hispanic people, undocumented people, lots of different sects of our society, people we live with, our neighbors, the way he's spoken about them horribly, like hatefully. Um, it's emboldened people. They see someone in such a powerful place behave this way. And what would make them think that they can't do the same thing as well? They can't emulate it. The person with the most power says it's okay. So who's going to stop me? Because, he's the leader of this country. And I think I don't, want to say F around and find out is what happened here, but it is a little bit, you're reaping a little bit what you sowed. And I don't want that for you. I don't want that for anybody, and maybe, I don't want to be sanctimonious liberal again, but maybe that's the difference between us and, people who vote for people like Trump is like, I don't have to agree with you to not want you to deal with the repercussions of like a horrible leadership. I want us all to be able to live in a country where we can feel safe. And I think partly like maybe, being a white guy from Boston, he's never felt like a marginalized person. And he's never had some of those defenses that I was talking about that I've had, that Caleb Heron had, maybe being a gay man or whatever it is. He's never felt like a marginalized group. And so he didn't have that consideration when he made his selection of a leader. But now you see the power of what that can do and how it's not a joke. And you embolden these people and you really unleash a Pandora's box on our country. And I'm not happy. I'm not in a gleeful "I told you so" place. I have to live here too, and I don't want to see that either. And I think we need to be more thoughtful. We need to be more careful with who we elevate. Um, and I don't have, funny quips about that one, so this might not be my viral clip, but I will sort of end with that, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks for tuning in.